Hello YouTube, Poopslag here. This is TurboFad, an open source video game I'm developing in the Godot engine. There's a link to the GitHub page in the description below. So this month I was planning to expand the overworld to include where you could solve some puzzles, earn some money, and there'd be like a day-night cycle and stuff like that. But it got derailed about halfway through for a very cool reason I will get to in about 2 minutes. So instead the last half was spent expanding the 2D portions and adding some quote-unquote pizzazz to it. So without further ado, let me show you what I've been working on. So I never had any grand visions for the overworld. It just needed to be passable, something you could walk around in. So I was planning to heavily leverage stock assets. I found Kenny's nature kit, which looked like a pretty good aesthetic that I could at least use as a starting point, maybe recolor or change some of the things from there. So I got the dirt and the auto-tiled paths, which are pretty cool, and the rocks. I got all that working really quick, and then what was this huge roadblock, which you would never guess, is the single freaking blade of grass. Right now you can see it is parallel to the terrain, and it doesn't look good. It needs to face the camera. You know, I wanted it to be like a little 2D billboarded sprite, but it turns out Godot cannot do that. Once it's in a mesh library, it cannot be rotated, and the only workaround is to create it in Blender, export it, and then import it into the game, but I didn't know how to use Blender at all. So I spent 3 days doing nothing but picking up Blender, figuring out how to use it, following tutorials. I made a donut, I made another donut, and after a ridiculous number of tutorials, I was finally able to create a flat plane with a texture on it. So at least the final result looks pretty good. I wish it had been easier. So this was about the time I got totally derailed off of 3D because on a whim, I just tried exporting my game as HTML5 and it basically all just worked magically. You can see this is running in a browser, everything's snappy, the sound works, the puzzles feel good. The only thing that does not work is the 3D. And it wasn't a small, you need to fix a few things crash. This was a hardcore, full stop. Godot will not handle 3D with GLLES 3 in a browser crash. You could not fix this. So seeing how close I was to having a game in HTML5, people could run it in a browser, I really wanted to go for this, and that meant giving up 3D entirely, unfortunately. So pivoting into 2D, I did find some pretty cool stuff to work on. After watching this 2016 GDC Microtalk session with Lee Perry on Pizzazz First, Polish Later, I realized my puzzle mode was missing a little pizzazz. There was positive feedback for combos as the creatures got fatter and fatter, but nothing to reward the player visually for completing boxes or to tell them they were on the right track. The first thing I tried was these flashy lights in the background when you cleared lines or got boxes, but I didn't like how that looked. But the next thing I tried was these little frosting blobs, which I think look great. All I did was draw a bunch of these fuzzy circles onto a viewport texture, and then apply 3 lines of shader code, which just turns the translucent parts of that viewport opaque. Then as far as the rainbows, I generated a cool gloopy rainbow texture on this shader toy website, and then I integrated that with the metaball code to have these cool rainbow metaballs. I started all this on May 13th, and I finished it on May 13th. No exaggeration, just all in one day. And it's insane what a difference that one day makes as far as the game looking cool and feeling fun. I'm not quite done with this stuff as I do want these rainbows and colors to splash onto the walls in the background to look really messy and cool. But that's coming soon. I still decided to work on the money because I figured that would carry over to 2D. It was all just 2D UI stuff anyway. So now when you beat a level, it totals up all the customers you served, adds to your money total, and then on the overworld, it shows you an abbreviated version of that money total, you know, like 13 million instead of 13186,983. That way the number is always guaranteed to fit in the corner in a nice tidy way. So one Sunday I was demoing my game for some people in Discord and they pointed out there was no feedback when your combo was about to end. I figured this was something players could track in their head, but then I realized it might be a cool opportunity to give them some feedback visually. So I took some of the lighting code I'd thrown away a few days before, and I repurposed it for these little background lights. They light up as you keep your combo going, but then they disappear as your combo's about to end. So this gives the player a little visual feedback about their combo. And once again, I started this on May 17th and finished it on May 17th, and the game looks so much cooler with this in it. I'm so glad I took that day. I wanted to make a tutorial, but before I could do that, I needed a level editor. I couldn't go hacking in all the blocks in the tutorial one block at a time through JSON. So I made this level editor where you could drag and drop pieces and blocks and rotate them, and it updates the JSON in real time so you can see it. It's ugly and buggy and very minimal, but it gets the job done for what I need now, and I'll make it cooler later. This was my first exposure to Godot's drag and drop stuff, which was incredibly easy. I could not have been more impressed. So with the level editor in place, I developed this tutorial. I didn't want a lot of instruction, I just wanted the player to be able to jump in and play because everyone's played Tetris and this game is similar enough to Tetris that I figured they could pick it up. So on the right, it gives you a checklist of keys to press and things to do, similar to Katamari Damacy's tutorial if you've played that one. And then on the left, you have this character Turbo who tells you what you should be doing next. I had this playtest and the tester got through it all right. His main feedback was that he needed more tutorial because this only walks you through the most basic concepts and there's a ton of stuff it does not tell you. His other feedback was that the sound effects were too loud, the pieces locked too quickly on the beginner difficulties, and that the game needed music. I had some music waiting in the wings, but I didn't want to put it in yet because there's only 1 or 2 tracks, and I thought it might wear on people. But he said, nah, you should go ahead and throw that in. People are going to want to see what the game feels like, and since it's still in early development, they're probably not going to play the game long enough to get sick of it. So yeah, I took all of his advice, I made the sound effects quieter, slowed down the piece lock times on the easier difficulties, and I started throwing in music. So out of the gate, I knew I wanted to put the music in this game pretty intelligently. I didn't want to just have some giant OGG file that gets played when the game starts and it just plays on a loop. I wanted to be smart about it. I was inspired by Super Hexagon, which is a ridiculously good game with a ridiculously good but short soundtrack. The whole game has about 6 or 7 minutes of music, but you don't get sick of it because they implement the music very intelligently. So the algorithm I went with is there's a process that runs in the background, and then every couple seconds, it checks whether a song is playing and which part of the song is playing. So it might figure out this part is playing, and next this part, and now this part. And then when it comes time to play a song it's played before, it tries to play a section of the song the players heard the least. And this works great, especially when the player's hopping back and forth between the same 2 songs while retrying a level. It gradually advances through the 2 songs until it hits the end, and then it might start somewhere in the middle if the player didn't hear that part of the song very much. One improvement I might make is to write this data to disk. That way when the player starts up the game, it starts in the middle of a song so they don't hear the first part of the song on startup. I haven't decided about that. I also overhauled the save system, not only making the files pure JSON, but adding this class to maintain backwards compatibility. If this detects an old save file, it'll run it through some regexes to convert it to the new format. For example, I renamed some of these scenarios from Marathon to Survival, so by doing some string replaces, it'll make sure your old records aren't lost. I also redesigned the practice menu this month. The old practice menu was just a collection of buttons that sort of evolved over time with no real vision to it. The new practice menu is a little bit more robust. It has a collection of modes up top that you can select, and then a slider for the difficulty. Your high scores are displayed at the bottom, and it includes your all-time high scores next to your daily high scores, so even if you're not setting records every day, you still have something to show. Also, it used to store all of your scores in the history of forever, but now it just stores the 6 it needs to display here. I also added 2 new modes, a rank mode for the super hardcore players who want to test their skills, and a sandbox mode for the less hardcore players who maybe just want to relax. So there's something for everyone. So that is where the game is as of the end of May. Next month, I am looking to port the 3D sections into 2D for compatibility with HTML5 and also to start trying to port the game into Android and iOS to see if there are any of the roadblocks in the way. Hope to see you guys next month. Thanks for joining me. Not good. Yeah. All right, see you guys in a month.